wow, what do you know? It's time for the Pocket Knife Show. Hey, it's Mike on the mic again for another episode of the Pocket Knife Podcast, right? I have plenty of annoying habits, right? I crack my knuckles all the time, sideways, downwards, twisting. I had a friend tell me I was doing it during times of silent prayer at church. Oops, right? I tend to do the same thing with my neck, which almost always feels out of place, right? It can be pretty painful, right? I want it to feel better, so I violently swing it to the side in hopes it will somehow be jerked into proper alignment. I'm sure my chiropractor would cringe if he saw me do it, right? I sometimes, some would say often, change the subject during conversations. I don't even notice that I've done it, right? Thankfully, I have a few friends who will call me on it. I give anyone who notices me doing it permission to bring it to my attention. I hate this rude behavior, right? When speaking, I frequently add the word right to the end of sentences. I didn't realize this until I started editing audio for this podcast and for my church's sermon podcast, right? It was ridiculous, right? I added that little questiony word to the end of every other sentence, right? Okay, maybe it wasn't that bad, but it was frequent enough, right? I noticed it. Most of my habits remain, but this one I tried to fix, right? Earlier this year, back in February, I started adding a crossed out right randomly to my sermon notes. These cues were bolded and in red text, right? Not like Jesus red letters, just bold red text so I would notice it. I wanted them to stand out, to remind me to avoid asking right over and over, right? Because it's annoying, right? Right! Have I stopped asking for people's agreement on what I've said? I think I have at least cut down on the number of times I tag a right onto the end of sentences. When I unintentionally add one not in my notes, I write everything out word for word because I tend to say weird things if I don't, right? I cringe inwardly now and usually edit it out if I can do so without sounding like the sentence is left hanging in midair. The question now is why I noticed this oddity, and beyond that, why I thought I needed to break the habit. As to the first part of the question, I noticed it because it was ridiculously frequent. I couldn't not notice, right? As to why it was a habit I wanted to be done with, I guess I wanted to make sure people weren't annoyed by this idiosyncrasy to the point of distraction. I want those who listen to me preach to hear what God has to say, right? I didn't want them sitting in their seats, pen in hand, making tally marks every time I added a right? I've tagged the end of sentences with this inquiring bent at least 18 times so far in this episode. I know I should stop doing it, right? But I'm guessing my point is being driven home. Am I right? Here's a question. Is there anything that you do which takes people's eyes or minds off of Jesus? Paul says this to the church in Romans 2:21-24. You then, who teach others, do you not teach yourself? You who preach against stealing, do you steal? You who say that people should not commit adultery, do you commit adultery? You who abhor idols, do you rob temples? You who boast in the law, do you dishonor God by breaking the law? As it is written, God's name is blasphemed among the Gentiles because of you. Actions which don't match up with what I claim to believe are much worse than habitually adding right to the end of my sentences, right? It's hypocrisy which takes people's attention off Jesus. That's why Jesus took the teachers of the law and the Pharisees to task. Their hypocrisy was making people want nothing to do with God and his ways, right? I'll probably annoy a few people in the coming year, right? I'll probably keep cracking my knuckles and popping my neck, right? I'll probably interrupt with unrelated subjects a few more times in my life, right? I'll probably insert a right at the end of a sentence 100,000 times in the next year, right? Will I act hypocritically? I pray I will do so less often. God help me, right? Oh no, it's sad I know we've come to the end of the show. See you next time.